everybody. We hope you enjoyed the little breather and the chance to chat, reflect. You've taken in a lot of information today. In this next session, we're going to pick up on talking about films, which is great. We're going to look at events and programming DIY style. And we've got some great examples of, both exhibitors and sales agents doing that kind of work. So first up, is it you first or not? We're going to go with Léonie, yeah. First up, we're going to go with Léonie Duflot from the Coproduction office, who will talk about keeping films alive.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I put together a short presentation with quite an ambitious title, Keeping Films Alive. But more simply, the idea is to share with you some concrete examples of how we as sales agents can sometimes collaborate directly with you as exhibitors. So following also the conversation we had this morning. So what are these collaborations? What are the advantages and the strategies behind it? So I decided to focus on one specific angle, which is the idea of revitalizing the filmographies of directors and more generally older titles, which is an idea very dear to Coproduction Office, the company for which I'm working. So I will first start by telling you a bit more about the Companico Coproduction Office, what we do, how we work, and then share a few examples of concrete partnerships. So a few words on the company. It's a production and sales company founded in 1987 by Philippe Baubert, who is still the managing director today. We have offices in Paris and Berlin, and our recent titles include some titles like The Square by Ruben Östlund, Little Joe by Jessica Hausner, About Endlessness by Roy Andersson, and more recently Il Buco by Michelangelo Framartino. And we're currently working on next projects by Ruben Östlund and Ulrich Seidel. So the common point between all these projects is the long-lasting relationship we've established with the directors. So for some of them, like Roy Andersson, who you can see here, we've been collaborating for over 20 years. So we've been co-producing his films since Songs from the Second Floor in 2000. And we're also selling his complete filmography. So here you have an example of all the titles for which we have the rights in our catalog. So our philosophy is to dedicate a lot of time to finding and discovering new talents and emerging filmmakers. The collaboration even sometimes starts before directors started their first feature films. And the idea is really to stay with them on the long term and to build with them their international career. So working with both production and sales really helps us achieving this goal, as it allows a full overview. So we're usually involved in the project at a very early stage, and we regularly engage in conversation with director all along the way. So speaking of data this morning, I can say that having worked on the director's previous films, we can also provide them with some market insights. So what has worked with their previous film, what has not worked, which is always valuable feedback when working on the director's new project from the development stage. So marketing-wise, it also allows us to start the campaign very early as well. So also having the experience of their previous films. So we always try to take advantage of this position, so working on the whole project from A to Z with some directors we know. So we try to contextualize the films a lot, give a lot of details on the production process, the director vision. We do our most to really work hand in hand with the directors. We do most of the marketing in-house. So we keep this very close relationship during the whole process. And we try to share as much info as possible with our distributors and by extension then with the audience. So here I just put some little examples of some excerpts of the press book we did for Il Buco, so Michelangelo Framartino's new film. So it was just to illustrate that we included some pictures we had from him on set. Then also some archive pictures. The film is about speleological expedition in the 60s in southern Italy with the discovery of one of the deepest caves in the world. And we had access through Michelangelo Framartino to some of the archives that also inspired him for the idea of the film. And we also added a map with indicating the filming locations of all these previous films. Yeah. So another activity of ours is the acquisition of classic and also the restoration of our titles. So we really try to accentuate our director's collection. So here I put the example of the work around the Rossellini titles. So it's a collaboration. The restoration is a collaboration between Cinecittà Luce in Italy, the Cineteca di Bologna in Italy, and Coproduction office. So we really worked on the restoration, and we wish to highlight the collection through suggesting retrospectives. And for example, recently we've worked in France with Back Film and on a French retrospective. So more generally, we invest really a lot of time and money in restoring our older titles, often in direct collaboration with the directors who supervise the work. For example, we're just done completing the restoration of Suge River by Louillet, who is a movie from 2000. And we believe it's also a bit part of our role as producers and sales agents to keep the films alive and to preserve and to try to make them cult films that do not die. So we're quite a small company. We produce and sell in average 2 movies a year. We have a relatively small catalog of approximately 100 titles. But our strength is that most of these titles are part of complete filmographies of director. And our work is really focused on raising interest around the whole body of work of our directors. And yes, we're very director-driven. So in that context, partnerships with exhibitors are very meaningful and valuable to us. So I picked different examples. I can start by telling you that for our fresher titles, let's say, it's always a great opportunity for us to work directly with exhibitors whenever we couldn't find a traditional distributor for that title. So we always try to be very flexible and very convenient. We coordinate also our best with talents and directors so that they can also join the event. And as I also discussed with some of you, I realized that exhibitors put a lot of care, usually, and effort in making this special screening and events very attractive. They're usually very well curated, and it's usually beautiful events. So as an example, I put the presentation of Aren't You Happy by Susan Irish, which recently screened at the ICA in London. So we were very happy to be able to still give the London audience the chance to discover a film they would not have been able to discover otherwise. So of course, this is very valuable to us, and it's also a very well targeted audience. So it's really a win-win situation. Another interesting way of working directly with exhibitors is working on older titles. So it's a good way to keep our classics and catalog titles alive. These are often titles which are too old for traditional distribution when the market is really saturated with new titles. So we try to establish lasting partnerships with exhibitors who also work and specialize on showing older titles. For example, we work closely with some cinémathèques. And I can tell you about our collaboration with La Cinémathèque Suisse. So it's a bit of a hybrid model between exhibition and distribution. They do handle the rights, for example, for our Rossellini titles and collection, and they organize screenings in La Cinémathèque, but they also offer the titles for rental as part of their diffusion catalog. So what they do is they also team up with other institutions, cinemas, cinema clubs, and alternative spaces in the territory to really allow this older title to still be screened on the big screen in the best possible way. Here, for example, I put an example where some of the catalog titles of the Cinémathèque were screened at the Locarno Film Festival last summer, including Germania Anno Zero. And we also work with La Cinémathèque on some other titles. So they really regularly pick some titles from our catalog to include them in some specific cycles or other very well curated program. It's something we really like to do because they're usually able to offer a real context for the films, which is also super interesting. And sometimes they also pick some fresher titles or some new titles to organize some special events. For example, here, it's a bit of an old example, but I really liked the video. So this was at the avant-première of Roy Andersson title, so already 5 years ago, A Pigeon Sat on a Branch Reflecting on Existence. So he came to the Cinémathèque to present this new film. And what was interesting is that in parallel to that screening, the Cinémathèque was also proposing some screenings of Roy Andersson's older titles. So it's really a good way to gain a comprehensive overview on the director's filmography. And this led me to my last example, which I think is really a great model of collaboration. So we sometimes work with exhibitors and distributors around the launch of a new title. So the idea is to organize retrospectives and focus on our director around the launch of a new title and to surf on the wave and make the buzz, word of mouth generated by the launch of the new title benefit the whole filmography of the director. So I don't know if that was super clear, but in this specific case, for example, we teamed up with Magnolia, the US distributor of Jessica Hausner's last film, Little Joe. And so on one side, it was the US distributor of her last film, and on the other side, it was a partnership with the movie theater, the Film Lincoln Center in New York, with whom we dealt directly the rights for Jessica Hausner's previous film. So as a result, we had a beautiful retrospective, and simultaneously to the launch of her new title. It's really the kind of event we love because it really helps having the whole picture and really focusing on the director's career. It's a way for us to build the director's career and to raise interest on the filmography more than an action with a lot of economical advantages. We do this more for the idea of raising interest around our director's body of work. And yes, I think the typical cinephile audience from the Lincoln Film Center, after seeing the retrospective, might want to discover her new film, and the other way works as well. So it's a super interesting collaboration. And yes, in this kind of event, we also act as coordinators. So, for example, in that case, we coordinated the tour of Jessica Hausner, and we asked her if she could also stop in the Film Lincoln Center to talk not only about her new film, because she was in New York to promote her new film, but also to have a broader, more general conversation about her whole filmography. So it's something we really try to do, giving the audience a full director's experience. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so great. So great to see you putting so much care into your back catalogue, because I think it's not always the perception that exhibitors have of a sales agent. But I can speak firsthand of working with the co-production office. We organised an Ulrich Seidel retrospective, probably before your time, but we worked with about 10 or 13 cinemas, and it was really easy to work with you. And we got Ulrich Seidel to Bristol, which was an experience, as you can imagine. But yeah, it was a really positive experience. So thank you so much.
Great to hear.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Frank, who will be talking about cinema DIY distribution at his fabulous cinema in Rotterdam.
Thanks, Léonie. I'm pretty sure we'll work together in the future too. It's really great to see a sales agent being so active and open in trying to work the back catalog. So yeah, I'd like to give some examples from the Netherlands. How you could do it yourself, distribute, because of course we love our distributors and they're doing great work, but sometimes there are titles that we'd like to show and we know that we have the audience for it, but maybe not the whole country will be interested. So it's good to contact directly a sales agent, but you will need a bit more. Well, we've heard a couple of examples where you can just approach a sales agent, but they also need some clout, some reason to give you their titles, and therefore I'd like to give one case study, which is not from our cinema, but from two cinemas in the Netherlands that found its way to join hands, and one of them is our film institute, the I Film Institute. And they found as a partner the Filmhalle, which is actually a commercial cinema in Amsterdam. Commercial in the sense that they do show movies like we all do, but they are a private enterprise, non-subsidized. But they both shared a love for movies, and they both really wanted, they saw some titles that they saw at festivals that didn't come out via the normal distribution ways. And they launched this program called Previously Unreleased. Previously Unreleased is 10 titles, released in summer when also the normal distributors, have a little bit less. They don't really like to take risks in summer. So the two cinemas started this program, and they both choose between 4 to 5 movies. and they jointly pay for the subtitles and the transport. And once that's already fixed, of course, they open this program also to other cinemas all over the Netherlands, who can then pick and choose which of the titles they like. And the subtitles are there, transportation is there. You just have to contact the sales agent representing the titles, or sometimes the Film Institute, steps in themselves. But in this way, we were able to screen The Souvenir, for example, which was overlooked, unfortunately, by the Dutch distributors, but which was a major success in summer. But also films like Eginap, Vitalina, Varela, and some beautiful titles that we also as programmers maybe never heard of, but trusting our fellow programmers from and Filmhalle actually could bring to our cinemas. And from Kino also I can say that quite often I went to a sales agent or distributors, producers from the US who normally would not be so interested in dealing with one cinema in the Netherlands. So what I then tried to do is, before I contact them, be it for a film like Fantastic Fungi, I don't know if you've heard about this. Yes, probably some of you have screened it as well. It's who haven't heard about it, it's a documentary about fungi and all the things they can do. And actually there was already a really big audience who was just waiting for this film to come because they heard about it in the US. But when I then contacted the production company, there was only one person doing everything for the whole wide world. But I had already talked to some exhibitors in the Netherlands, so I could say, hey, I represent 6 cinemas. Could we get the film? And then, of course, it could. And there were some really great results. And in the end, 6 other cinemas in the Netherlands also, via me, got into contact with the guy, and it was all solved. So, there are possibilities for newer titles. But there's also, of course, we do, most of us, quite some classic repertory titles, of which Madeleine in a bit will give a really good example. We do it a bit on a smaller scale, but also for this we try to share it sometimes with other exhibitors to have a bit more clout. So we do about 3 to 4 programs per year, usually themed. We have a ongoing program called New York Stories or Berliner Geschichten, or in which we focus on a specific city. And we try to bring older titles, somewhat newer classics, big Hollywood films. Of course, you're going to screen Goodfellas in a film about New York, but also some more unknown films. And by creating a trailer in which you combine the films, I will give you an example shortly, you can try to lure people who know Goodfellas, who know John Travolta films, to somewhat more obscure films. This trailer, it's nice to make trailers, but to do it well, it is quite expensive because it just takes a lot of time. We cannot do it ourselves. But if you get a group of cinemas together, it's actually feasible. And like I said, you can make one deal, be it with Park Circus, be it with a distributor from the US, be it with whoever, if you deal for multiple cinemas. And here are just some examples. The co-production office should absolutely be on the list of sales agents or parties that are really open, that have the world rights for films and are really open to deal with exhibitors as well. And yeah, some programs are Identity Cinema, or now we have a program called Art of the Heist with 19, it's a bit much, but 19 heist movies. But so here a little breakdown of in a specific case how we could do it and how the costs could look like if you share it with multiple theaters. And this is also what we offered to the theaters. So the more people would join, the cheaper it would be for everyone. And we tried to make a calculation because of everybody has a different audience and a different amount of people that they expect with a certain program. So we tried to calculate already a little bit. This is what it could look like if you join. So yeah, these are some examples of how we try to do it and how we try to get classic titles, which of course are always quite expensive to show, but very important for our programming. How we try to get them in our program. But I believe Madeleine has even bigger story to tell about how you could do this. So, Maddie, give the floor to you.
Yeah, bigger is not always better. Right. So, yeah, I'll just tell you the story a little bit about this festival that we started. It was actually inspired by a Europa Cinemas Lab, which happens in Bologna every year at the wonderful Il Cinema Ritrovato festival, which is dedicated to repertoire cinema. And I kind of fell in love with that festival and built a relationship with the team, and we decided to do something similar in the UK on a much smaller scale. And we managed to do that with the blessing of Gianluca Farinelli, which was great. So we became a tiny little offshoot. We've been going for 6 years now. Sadly, we had to cancel in 2020 for obvious reasons. And we decided to make a comeback in July this year, which was quite a risky moment. But we felt really strongly about doing something on a big screen. We didn't want to go online. We just didn't think it was the right thing to do. So we turned it into a kind of big celebration of the return to cinema, and also as a way of supporting other local cinemas in our area, of just going, this is it, celebrate the big screen experience. But most of us were operating at 50%, so we knew the audiences were going to be down. And we decided that as we were a smaller operation, we would, in a way, expand the festival in a different way. So we had a partnership with Mubi, which was great, working on the launch release of Perry Hensel's The Harder They Come, as we were showing his follow-up film, No Place Like Home, in the cinema and touring that in venues. The other thing we looked at was to expand the touring program, which we had started to develop. We had started to develop the previous years. We'd managed to get about 13 venues on board. And as Frank just said, it enables us to kind of go to sales agents and also places like Cineteca di Bologna and go there with the confidence that we can get at least 10 venues on board for our tour. That's where we started the negotiations. And we spoke to Janus in the States about the restoration of Melvin Van Peebles' debut film. And there was a 4K restoration doing the rounds in the States. We really wanted to bring it to the UK. It had actually never been screened in the UK before. Fantastic backstory about Melvin going to France to make his first film because he couldn't break into Hollywood. So that was one of the titles that we kind of got behind. And the other one was more of a curated program, which was about the year 1971, the year that Hollywood went independent. There's some really interesting films that came out that were released during that year, like Clute, Two Lane Blacktop, Five Easy Pieces, and McCabe and Mrs. Miller. And when we did the research, we realized that all those titles were actually with Park Circus. They all had fairly recent restorations. And they were really keen on the idea of us doing this program. So we managed, for the first time ever, to actually negotiate a reduction on prices for touring this work. And the way we did it was by creating a combo drive, which had all the titles on it. So, and venues weren't forced to book all the titles, but they were encouraged to. They knew they could if they had the drive. And it was a really sort of cost-effective way of us being able to tour the program. And it allowed us to go beyond what we call the usual suspects. So the venues like Home in Manchester, Showroom in Sheffield, that we knew would take the tour, we could actually pitch this much wider. And I think also it was the first time that we really felt that Park Circus actually got on board with us almost as a commercial partner. They put some money, they designed the lovely poster image, and we were also able to bring, because we're a festival and we have various in-kind sponsors, we were able to bring a really good company, Silk Media Factory, to do the trailer, which I'm just going to show you quickly. Next slide, yeah.
You wouldn't believe how this country's changed. I'll see you in a year or two if I don't get shot.
If a person has no respect for himself, how can he expect love in return?
So yeah, what was different about us doing this trailer is that we actually got the blessing of 3 different studios. We worked with the official materials. In the past, we had done kind of DIY rip-off trailers and so on, but this time we kind of did it properly, which was good because we were able to be a bit more open with the studio about what we'd done, and we could work together on the kind of getting it out there and making sure it had a big impact. And 27 cinemas came on board, which was absolutely way beyond our expectations. It was kind of twice more the number of venues that we were anticipating, not just taking a single film, which was our original idea was just to go out with 2-lane blacktop because of Monte Hellman's passing, but they ended up actually booking all the films, which was great. The poster design went down really well. People were kind of, I wish we'd done more prints, actually. That's something with hindsight. We'd done a kind of limited edition of the print. We had quite a small amount of a small run of it. And I think it really solidified our partnership with Park Circus. It felt like we were really actually working in partnership. And we're now talking early about how we can perhaps look at another aspect of their catalogue. Although in a way it was by chance that all the films happened to be in their catalogue, we're quite keen to kind of do it the other way around, look through their catalogue and see if we can do something interesting. So it's also brought us a little bit closer to the studios, which is, these are hard relationships to develop, and to think that one day we might be able to have some level of influence in terms of what gets restored, or at least have the start of a conversation is really great. And in terms of assets, so we were on a micro budget for the tour. It's literally just me working on it. So what we decided to do is use some of the materials that we were producing for the festival itself, and make sure that as we were doing that, we were producing it for the tour as well. So things like commissioning short intros. We commissioned a guy called Amos who works for Mubi, who's absolutely brilliant, who did a short introduction to McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which actually was a beautiful video essay. I'll share the link in the Facebook group. And we also had things like our programmer talking to our local video shop, which is actually the smallest cinema in Bristol, 20th Century Flicks, about a sort of introduction. If you don't care, you don't know anything about 1971 and why it's interesting, it was kind of done from that ingénue perspective. And he was able to sort of open up a conversation about it. It also enabled us to commission some speakers who weren't able to come to the festival to do introductions. For instance, Galen Gold, who used to be at the BFI did a really lovely introduction as well, which gave sort of different perspectives on the film, fresh perspective and critical perspective as well. And one of the things that was not challenging, but our festival is very dedicated to diversity, inclusion, and with it scaling down that year, we had more films by men, which was not something that was an ideal scenario. In previous editions, we had been known for having a really diverse slate of films. But after doing some research into the films, we felt that there were a lot of women actually attached to the films that we were showing. And there was lots of potential for us to explore some of the women that were perhaps behind the scenes around the films. Take people like Jane Fonda as well in front of the camera, and to kind of bring them to the fore and almost try to retell that story. So, it's Jane Fonda's Kloot as far as we're concerned. And we partnered up with Invisible Women, who are actually based in Berlin, to do a whole set of editorial interviews, podcasts, to kind of bring that story to life. Pamela Hutchinson also opened our festival and talked about this and took part in a panel which looked at rewriting film history. So it was a really interesting way of bringing women into the fore when actually those films are directed by men. This is just a few of the kind of comments from some of the the various partners we work with, and also some of the kind of media partnerships that came on board. And the season also was a great way of bringing Park Circus a little bit closer to us in terms of our industry strand. So we actually run an industry strand online for this edition, because we didn't feel like industry practitioners would be willing to travel, or there wouldn't be enough of them. And the idea with the industry strand is about developing the confidence and the risk-taking amongst exhibitors, really, to feel more confident in programming repertoire films, programming archive in interesting ways. And we ended up jumping on one of the regular webinar strands which Park Circus organizes, and did a joint session which worked really well. We had something like 200 people attending and catching up on it. And I know, Frank, you've participated in those. So if you are organizing something about rep cinema, it's always worth getting in touch with the Park Circus team and proposing an idea. Press coverage was, I'm not going to lie, it was really hard work this year. It was tough. It just felt like the national press didn't really want to get behind events. They were, I think, a bit nervous about festivals in case they cancelled or moved. But we did get the front page of The Guardian, which was great, for the story of a 3-day pass, and worked with various blogs and various other magazines. And obviously having Park Circus on board helped, because they put their own press team on this, as well as our own very tiny festival team. The other thing that we do each year is we have a film critics program that we run as part of the festival, and something that no one wants to fund really, but we're really passionate about this. The idea that, especially as we're outside London, that we can be a platform for film critics and a platform for new and emerging talent, and offer them an opportunity to kind of develop their voice, develop their profile, and so on. And we've been working with Mubi, Tara Judah, who some of you may know from. She's often doing international work at Rotterdam and other places. Yeah, and it's great. It's a way of, we do this through open call, so anyone can apply from across the UK. One of the criteria is diversity and inclusion, so we really try to get people that aren't the usual suspects. And they get their first publishing break, so we gave them a small fee for doing an article in relation to the festival. And the way we shaped it this year, as a result of COVID, was to do it online leading up to the festival. Those participants that were able to come to the festival could, but we also gave them screeners, and they could have the option of going to their local venue. So I connected them with